Good afternoon. I'm Josh Fallon with Schnabel, a geostructural design and construction company. I'd like to tell you a bit more about Schnabel. I love a good story. Schnabel is a tale of two brothers. Harry had a passion for design, build, construction, and Jim preferred consulting. Harry owns Schnabel Foundation Company, and Jim owned Schnabel Engineering Inc. In 2019, we changed our name from Schnabel Foundation Company to Schnabel Geostructural Design and Construction, a name that better reflects who we are now and what we do today. Not only excavation support, but also a proven design build contractor. The story of Schnabel is a story about leadership and the culture that grew the company and sustains the company today. Creating a culture of leadership is an essential element for business owners to attract and retain talent. A culture of leadership is based on a well-defined vision, core values, and a mission statement that describes what you do well and how and why you do it. Joint thought leaders Mike Tafoya and Dirk Dykson, partners of, is it Portocol Business Strategies, for this high impact discussion on how to create a culture of leadership in your business. Gentlemen, help us understand what is important and how to improve our culture and what the tools are to engage our employees.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh.
Absolutely.
I'm missing my business partner, but he should be here soon. So hopefully you guys will get to meet Mike Tafoya as well. In the meantime, let me share my screen. And if I could get someone to confirm, are you able to see what I'm sharing at this point? Can you see my slide?
Yeah, it looks like it's up. You're good, Mike, or Dirk.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Well, our topic today is leadership for success. We're going to talk about building a leadership culture. And before we get started, I've actually got a question for you. So the question that I have is, does your company have a business culture? Now, I can't see what you're typing in the chat, but I would ask you each to answer that question in the chat. Give us your thoughts. Does your company have a business culture? And I'll give you a minute to type your response, and then I will give you my thoughts on this. All right. So the way that I think about this topic is that every business has a culture. The real question is whether your business culture is intentional or accidental. Every business has a culture. So if you're not being intentional with your culture, it is happening accidentally. If you're not managing your culture, it is managing you. So let's go ahead and get started with the agenda. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, I've got a couple of leadership questions for you to ponder. And then I want to dive right into why build a leadership culture and essentially what is culture? What are the key components of it? How do you define it, in other words? We'll talk about a business culture myth, and then we'll wrap up with some specifics on how to engage employees and how to build a leadership culture. So let me pause there and actually get you to give me some more feedback in the chat. And what I'd like to hear from you now is what were you hoping to get out of this session? So each of you has jumped into this meeting with us. You're scheduled for the next 45 minutes or so. What were you hoping to get out of this time together? So just put your answer in the chat and let's see what you have to say. And Mike, I see you joined us as well.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sounds great. All right, so I can't see responses in there, Candy. Hopefully people are able to add their comments in the chat. But let me keep going and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Okay, so the question I've got for you to answer on the leadership side of things, let me go back into this. We reviewed the agenda. So here's 3 questions I want you to think about. Number 1 is, how do you define leadership? So I find that there's a lot of different definitions for leadership. And Mike, I'd be interested in your input on this too. But how would you describe leadership in terms of how we define it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think when I ask that question in a public arena, a lot of business owners will say, I lead by example. And that's a great start. But to me, leadership is much more than just working hard or doing the right thing. But that certainly is a big part of it. We're going to really dig down deep into leaders and think about what makes people want to follow or be attracted to what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that's really the objective of, I think, a great leader. A great leader is going to be able to take people where they probably wouldn't be able to go on their own.
Yeah, great description. Thanks, Mike. All right, the second question, I'll give you a moment to think about this one too, is how do you impact company morale and ultimately employee engagement? I think we all know the impact of employee engagement. It leads to higher productivity. So, Mike, why don't you share your thoughts on this question as well?
Yeah, leadership. And are we supposed to be seeing a change in the PowerPoint slide at all?
You are. Do you see that second question?
I do not.
You don't.
So that's why I asked. So the PowerPoint, there you go. How do you impact company morale? And well, leadership certainly is going to impact morale positively or negatively. And I think about the challenge. The challenge with leadership is if people aren't following you, then morale tends to lag. And when morale lags, you get dissension and animosity among the ranks. And that's where a big challenge, will exist. At some point, if you allow that environment to exist, your high-performing employees are going to want to leave and go somewhere else where they can be engaged and they can be part of an organization that is going to grow.
Yeah, great point. And I know we're going to have another conversation to go deeper into that topic specifically about employee retention and engagement tomorrow. So look forward to continuing that one for sure. Question 3 was, do you know where your company's headed and how it will get there? And so let's give folks a moment to think about that one. And then let me hear your thoughts on that one too, Mike.
Yeah, we'll give a moment. I don't see much activity on the chat. I know there's several people here that are listening in and hearing this. I sure would like to have any comments at all, so we can have a little bit more engagement since we're talking about engagement. And Candy, yes, the chat is working, so I did see that. So, when I think about building a company, I think, we're talking to contractors here, and I grew up in the construction industry from a very young age. And so when I think about construction and building a building, we start with the design, we take that to a plan, and we know what we're going to build. We're going to build a 10-story building. It's going to be, so many square feet. It's going to have systems, internal and external to the entire building, but we know every component that is going to go into that building. And that's what we build, right? We build that 10-story building from start to finish. And with a company, I believe building a company and leading a company is the same way. I have to be able to share a vision of what this company is going to be like when it grows up or when it matures, right? And that way people can be invested in that growth process and be part of the company as it develops.
Perfect. Thanks for that context. All right, one more topic here for you, Mike, and then I'll cover the next few slides. But on this one, let's talk folks through the 7 pillars of business and specifically help people understand what exactly is culture and how you define it.
Yeah, culture is amazing. We're going to dig in. I know you're going to dig in deeply into what a culture actually is, and I'll probably have some things to say about culture. But when I think about culture in the business, I think about clearly defining the appropriate behaviors in the organization, right? So when I build a company, It's like asking, and I hire people, it's like asking them to be on my team and to play the game that I'm playing. And for me, culture is about defining the rules, and I call it the rules of engagement. We're going to see this a little later, but we're going to have rules about behavior, how we treat each other, how we treat our clients, how we treat the company, the assets, how we treat the community, et cetera. And the culture protects the business environment that I want to have and that I want to nurture in the organization. And so that's why in this image, we create the roof as the business culture as a symbol of protection for the rest of the organization that we've built.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. All right. So I'm going to need your help here. Did the screen update? You should see fact or myth. Do you see that?
Not yet.
You still see the 7 pillars?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to have to go back into this mode. So that steals my thunder a little bit, but let's talk about one key factor myth here. And the myth is people are born leaders. So let's, if you look at what Vince Lombardi said, he said leaders are made, they're not born. They're made by hard effort, which is the price which all of us must pay to achieve any goal that is worthwhile. So we certainly believe that that leaders are not born, but in fact made, and that's something we all work on every day that we're in business. So let's think through 2 more questions, and then we'll dive into the rest of the content. So the exercise I want you thinking about for this topic specifically is what's in it for me. The second thing I want you to be thinking about is what are your top 3 leadership challenges. So as you think about your situation, your leadership, how you impact other employees, what are 3 top challenges that you're seeing in your company? So take a minute and think about that. And then Mike, I'll ask for your input there again.
Again, not seeing any activity on the chat. And I know that some of you folks are out there and you're probably just wondering, what do these guys have to say and how can they enlighten us? But really, these are supposed to be conversations. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get, probably going to get tired just listening to me. I would sure love to hear what some of you have to think about these topics. But I think about what's in it for me. I think as a business owner, and I've been a business owner since I was a very young age, and I was focused on business. I was focused on making sales, creating revenue, and delivering goods and services. I wasn't thinking about being a leader in my business, and so a lot of us don't even think of ourselves specifically as leaders. We think of ourselves as business owners, and one of the things that I would want to take away is how can I, with what I have, create a system that will help me become a better leader in the business. And I think that's probably my number one, what's in it for me, Dirk. It's like, how can I systematize becoming a leader? Because there's a million different systems out there. You can read 100 different books on leadership, and they'll all take you in a somewhat different direction.
Yeah, great point. So I'd be interested too, Mike, and I'll answer this question too, but I'm curious, what would you say are some of the top leadership challenges that you're seeing from CEOs and executive teams, business owners?
Well, I tell you, I believe I know one of the top 3 for sure, and that is maintaining a consistent business culture throughout an organization as it grows.
Yeah.
So as we increase the number of employees, perhaps the numbers of locations that we have, the numbers of departments as our company grows and scales, et cetera, maintaining a consistent culture. Think about companies that are in expansion and growth when they're going out and making an acquisition and they're buying another company that potentially has a completely different culture. And then they have to integrate those cultures together. So that's another sort of similar challenge. But how do I maintain the culture that I want to have in the business throughout, all the different elements of the company.
Yeah, great point. When I think of those challenges that I hear regularly from business owners and CEOs, I think the main one is taking the time, slowing down, and working on the business, not in the business. And that applies to two key areas that I see. One is the culture that you just mentioned. A second would be creating strategic clarity. That's something maybe a company might revisit every couple of years, or maybe even once a year. But how do you maintain that strategic clarity over time can be a real challenge. The other things that I see are the challenges I see are how do you create a culture of performance where you have trust and accountability and a team that's performing. So that whole notion of creating a culture of performance. A second key challenge would be, how do I create structure and process to enable my company to scale? And if companies scale too quickly, things break. All of a sudden, all we're doing is firefighting instead of being proactive. And it just doesn't work anymore. If you don't have the structure and process in place to grow, then that's certainly a key challenge as well. And I think the third one is developing that next generation of leaders around you. And I see very often leaders, business owners especially, and CEOs who just have trouble developing that next generation of leaders and building a business that can run where if they step away for a moment, the business can run without them. You want to add any comments there, Mike, or are you good?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of challenges. I think one of them is that business owners don't know how to create a culture. So that's, part of the challenge, right there is, how do I create a culture? What is a culture? And how does that help me in my business? I think there's a chasm for a lot of business owners that just really don't grasp the concept. And it's, it is a little bit of a concept, but when you start to see it working in your business and you can measure it, then it becomes real. And culture is a real thing in business. And most public companies, CEOs will tell you their number one most important activity in the business is to maintain and promote a healthy business culture throughout the organization.
Yep, I agree. All right, well, let's keep going through our presentation. So, really what we want you to be thinking about is that culture is a system. How do we make culture a system? And so there's really two components. First is to think of the elements of culture, and the second is to think about how do we create a system that works. So on the culture side, that's really about leadership, inspiration, and motivation. Creating a culture and owning a culture is really about how you attract and lead people. On the other side, we've got systems that are all about processes and policies and procedures. And our key focus here is on how we manage and control systems. And Mike, I'd like your input on this one too. What I see often is that leaders think they have to control people and instead of attract and lead people. And sometimes they forget to manage and control the system itself. But let me hear your thoughts on this one.
Well, this is a great slide. I love this because I like to say, that we lead people and we manage systems, right? And it's not that way, because most managers think they need to control everything, including people. You said that yourself, and I think that's where there's a huge cultural challenge when you're trying to control and manage people, because that can look like micromanagement. And it's not that we shouldn't have controls and measures and expectations for people and performance, but we lead them to achieve those ideals versus managing or controlling them, right? And it's a lot easier to manage a system or control a system than it is to manage and control people. So these words, leadership, inspiration, motivation, as a leader, that's what I want to be able to see from people. I want people to come to me and say, oh, Mike, I'm so excited about what we're doing. And here's a result of some of our activities. And then I can point to business culture and say, that's why we do those things, right? And on the other side, systems. And I think when things break, when something's broken or there's a mistake that happens, it's very common for people to say, well, okay, who did it, right? Who's to blame? And instead of blaming people, I always look at the system first. What could the system do better to empower those people to do a better job versus blaming the people? And more times than not, a majority 80-20 rule, I can find a problem with the system before I find a problem with a person.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Mike. All right. So the next, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a question that came into the chat, and I didn't know if you were able to see the chat.
I cannot see the chat, unfortunately, but yeah.
I can see it. So I was looking, I created a poll and I was looking over there, but I do see from Memco Staffing, what would you say the best way to instill this leadership mentality into my team to create more leaders within my organization? So that's a great question. And we're going to address that in this presentation. So I think if you hold on just a little bit, we're going to take those steps in the next few slides. You'll start to see some of that, and then you can let us know whether we've answered that question a little deeper into the presentation.
Agreed. Thank you. All right. So going further on culture as a system, thinking about these two components, right? You attract and lead people and you manage and control systems. And so if you look at culture in its basic form, there's really three key elements to a culture. Number one is vision. That's really about the passion and the purpose. I like to say that's why we exist. The second key component is the values, the core values, and that provides the rules of conduct. How will we behave with each other? How do we behave? How do we make decisions, et cetera? The third key component is the mission. That deals with the what, the how, the where, and the who. And really, we'll dig into each of these a little bit more in detail, but that gives you the high level, right? Those three components, and we're going to talk through each of those here in a little more detail. So first of all, culture, thinking about the vision element of culture, remember that's passion and purpose, why we exist. So what we like to say is that purpose and vision must be aligned, and often they're synonymous. So there's really three steps that we see to creating vision. Step number one is thinking through that list of desired outcomes that you want clients to experience. I like to think of this from a philosophical standpoint. Really, this is a great opportunity to be idealistic about what your clients deserve. So creating that list, what are the desired outcomes? What are we helping them to accomplish? Not what products and services can we sell them, but really what is it we're trying to help them accomplish? Step number two is take that list and then define that vision, again, from a philosophical standpoint. What do we want them to accomplish? And then step three is finalize that. And ultimately, the real magic happens when you write this big vision out and then you force fit it down to one sentence. That's the hardest part of the exercise, and it's the most valuable. It's where you really get that succinct statement that is inspiring and motivating for a team. So, Mike, feel free to add any comments or fill in the gaps here.
Yeah, I know. I'm so passionate about this, Dirk.
I know.
And I think about vision it's an external, right? So this vision is not internal to the business; it's external to the client or to the marketplace that we serve. And so I want you to think about it this way. It's like, what is the highest impact that you want to make on your client or your customer? And I'll just give you our example at Portocol. So our vision is your success. So that's the impact that we want to have on every stakeholder in our company, whether it's employees or partners or clients or organizations. We want to impact success for the organization. And so that's what I'm passionate about. I know how difficult it is to succeed in business. And so helping people achieve success is the number one reason why we wake up in the morning and go to work, right? That one thing. And that's what gets me excited. It's what gets all of our team members and partners excited, is helping business owners and business leaders succeed. So what is your impact? That's what I would ask. What is the impact that you want to make on the marketplace, or impact? And if you can't define it in more than one sentence or less than one sentence, it's probably too long. It's just simple. I want to have, let's see, I want to impart safety, right? I want people to feel secure. I want people to have financial independence, et cetera. I mean, it's just, create lists and lists of things that companies do to help impact their client.
Thank you. All right. So step 2 is to define the values. And again, that's the rules of conduct. It's how we behave. So there's a few key points I want to make here about core values. First of all, this is the company's deepest beliefs and the essential principles of how you do business, how you make decisions, how you run the company, how we behave, and how we treat each other. So core values should be aligned with all company activities as well as behaviors. And two key elements here are: breaking a core value is often a reason for disciplinary action or termination. And the one that I see a lot of people forget is that demonstrating a core value is a cause for acknowledgement. You might even say celebration. This is something that I like to see done very regularly. And Mike, this is something you're really good at, is demonstrating a core value. And when we see someone demonstrating a core value, we celebrate it, we acknowledge it, we draw attention to it, and make sure that people get recognized for that. So
yeah, and absolutely. Let me give you an example of that, Dirk, and for the rest of the attendees. What we're doing here today, we're doing as a team, right? And we're team members, we're partners, but we're also team members. And so one of our core values is teamwork. Is that we encourage each other in the accomplishment of our vision and mission. And so doing this together was really important to me, that not just one of us do this, because one of us could have run through these slides for the group, but to really create the most impact, I felt like this really needed to be a team effort. And so having that as a core value is really important to us. So that's just an example. So I would want you to think, what are the most important behaviors you have in your company, and why do you do them? What's the rule for that? If somebody violated that rule, what would the consequence be? Right? And so I like to think of core values at rules of conduct, right? I also say rules of engagement, right? It's the rules that you will have to live by if you want to play on my team, right? So think about this as a team. If we're playing a sporting event, guess what? There's a bunch of rules. And if you break those rules, what happens? A penalty flag is thrown, or there's some sort of violation or whistle blown. There's some, description of the penalty, and then there's a consequence, right? You get ejected from the game, or you get a 15-yard penalty, or something happens. And the same should happen in business. When you violate a core value, which are the deepest principles and beliefs, then there should be a consequence, right? And on the other side, when we do the right things, there should be celebration.
Absolutely. So I've got a second slide on values that because I'm going to show you exactly how to get there. If we were sitting in front of you in a workshop, we would probably give you a few minutes to actually work on this and give you some coaching to help you accomplish that and achieve success. For now, let me just give you some clear next steps on how to take this next step of defining your core values. So step 1 would be choose a list of words or phrases that represent deep beliefs about the company. We talked about that a minute ago. Now, for some of you, if you start with a long list, you'll circle all these words or you'll identify all these phrases, and you might end up with 25 to 50. I would say don't go more than that. But then the step 2 is to shorten that list and really go through the process of identifying what are those top 10 out of the initial ideas that I came up with, and then ultimately select the 3, 5, or 10 as your final core values. The next step is one that people skip often, and it's probably the most important step, and that is to clearly define each value. Each value should not only have a word that represents that core value, but also a brief description that makes it abundantly clear what that means and how I can follow that rule of conduct. Mike, any comment there?
Yeah, and I think, this is great. I think you nail it here. But I want to get back to Memco staffing, because now we talked about the vision. And so I'm attracting people. I'm getting people on my team that have that same passion. And that's really important. So we hire to culture, right? So we hire to passion and purpose. We hire to the why in the business. We also hire to certain qualifications and experience and personality characteristics and strengths, etc. But that passion and purpose is probably number one. And then these rules of engagement. People love to know the rules, right? And when there's no rules, people will start making up their own rules. And so this is how we start to systematize and help our managers become great leaders, is giving them a defined written culture that they can promote and uphold throughout the business. And there's more to it than that. We actually have a system of developing this culture that we're going to talk about later in the presentation.
All right. The third key element of culture as a system is mission. And remember, Mike made that key point of documenting it, making sure it's written. So important to do that. So mission is about the what, the how, the where, and the who. And really, this should be a short paragraph that concisely describes what the company does, how and where it does it, and for whom. So the statement should reflect how the company is differentiated from its competition, and it should include strategic and tactical elements of the business. 5 key things, for example, would be core competencies. What are we really good at? What comes very naturally for us and is uniquely a competency of ours? What are the tactics we'll use to accomplish this mission? What markets will we be in? With what are geographies? And especially going beyond core competencies, what are the differentiators that we can rely on? Mike?
Yeah, oftentimes, and I see this very often in all different levels of corporations, they confuse the mission with the vision, right? They get them swapped out. Because vision for a lot of people is too ethereal, right? And the word mission makes them feel like this is the real mission, right? The mission is to help companies succeed. Well, that's the purpose, right? And the passion. So we call that the vision. The mission is, how are we going to do this, right? We're going to help people grow. We're going to help companies grow strategically. We're going to help companies develop their management teams. We're going to help them align on the strategy and tactics and systems. And those are the true how tool. The mission is not an ethereal, sound good, feel good paragraph. This is a very realistic description of what you do in your business, what you do, how you do, where, who you do it with. And so it doesn't need to be flowery. It just needs to be very concise, so that when somebody reads that, they should know exactly what you do, how you do it, where you do it, and who you do it for, and what makes you different in the marketplace.
Agreed.
And that's great for people, so they can read their mission. It's great for employees to be able to read a mission that describes what the company actually does in reality. So that's how we sort of round off the system of culture with the mission statement.
Agreed. The way I like to describe it too, Mike, is I see the vision is our purpose. It's our meaning. It's why we exist, and the mission is how we will accomplish that vision. Interested in your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I missed the last part of what you said. I apologize. I
No
know
worries.
you had an email in the chat there, and I wanted to look at it, and so I took my attention off of you. So could you repeat that?
No worries. Let's do this. Let's keep moving. And is there a question there though that you want us to address, or we should consider?
No, there's not. It was just something else. But
Okay, let's do this.
I think you're right on point. So
Okay.
let's just keep moving forward.
Perfect. All right. So I just, as an example, I wanted to show you our what we call our culture plaque. It's a great way to document in written form both your vision and your core values. And down at the bottom of this document would be the mission as well, if I could fit that in there. But anyway, it gives you an example. And again, short and sweet. Our vision statement. Our vision is your success. Mike talked about the core value of teamwork. We rigorously support and encourage each other as we work towards our vision and mission. And you even saw him describe how that worked in real time in how we prepared for this event. All right. So with that, let's go to the next slide. And Mike, I'm going to have you talk through these next 3 slides.
Yeah, and engaging employees and building a leadership culture. I think this is, I like to say engaging stakeholders, with our culture, because this is not just for employees. Although today we're talking about how do we inspire and attract and retain our best people. And I believe that the number one way that we do that is with a solid business culture. Meaning when we tell people about our company, we tell them about what we experience day in and day out, and they get excited about it, and then they start to experience the culture firsthand, because culture really is just how we behave in the business. And so you can have a culture plaque that says all kinds of cool things, but if you don't really behave like that, look, employees are much smarter than I sometimes think we give them an opportunity to be, not an opportunity to be, but we give them credit for being, is if we don't have the business culture that we say we have, they know it right off the bat and they're going to leave. And you've got to have the business culture that you promise to deliver. And so by defining it, we start there at the very key point. Once we've defined it, we've written a culture plaque. There's 3 phases of implementation of the culture into the business. And the first stage is to promote and uphold the culture. So communicate it at every opportunity, every business meeting, every interaction or coaching session with an employee, every job interview, every hiring, onboarding. It's all about culture, what we believe, how we behave, what we do, how we do it, and we promote that. Then we enforce the culture with natural and logical consequences. So if you violate it and it's a 5-yard penalty, give a 5-yard penalty. If it's a 15-yard penalty, give a 15-yard penalty. If you need to reward somebody because they did something well within the culture, then reward them for it. And then encourage each one of your people to learn 3 to 5 of the cultural elements that they can be passionate about, so that they can share those elements with other employees and other stakeholders. So I'll tell you, I have a couple of items within our culture that I always share, and that's the culture of family, right? So we treat our clients with love, compassion, and respect, period, right? Because, business leaders need a little love. Nobody's there to love the leaders, right? So we need to love them. And that means that we understand them, we respect them. And so, learn 3 or 4 elements, have it become part of your normal spiel when you're talking to people. And that'll be the first stage. If we can get everybody talking about it, that's the first stage. Then we go to the next stage. The next slide.
Oh, thank you. I didn't cut your hand off. By the way, Mike, I didn't give the context on this. And so really, this is the how. we talked about the culture plaque, but there's three
Yep.
key elements to how you actually do this, how you build a leadership culture and engage employees and stakeholders, to your point, in this topic of culture.
Yeah. So the first stage was, to promote and uphold, right? The next stage is, once we get people talking about it, I want them to own and embrace it. I want them to start to love our business culture, right? So those 3 to 5, right, that they felt passionate about, they really start to embrace, like my family core value and my teamwork core value. And we have a learning core value, which means that at Portocol, we're always learning and evolving, right? Learning, improving, evolving. Those are just a few of the things that I just love about our business culture, right? So now I want people to really start to get passionate about it. Learn and connect culture statements to business activities and behaviors, like I did earlier as the example, right? The teamwork example. I want in meetings, I want people to share a success story, and then I want them to share what cultural element does that illustrate or demonstrate in the company, right? So that's a practical thing that you can get people to do, and take 5 minutes at the beginning of every meeting and have 2 or 3 people share a success story and a cultural connection. And that will start to really allow people to start to own and embrace. Engage the cultural elements for which you are passionate. Look, we might not be passionate about every single element, but there's certainly going to be a handful that you are going to be passionate. Those are the ones I want you to embrace, right? And then share your passion and commitment with others. And that's how we're going to continue to promulgate the culture throughout the organization, right? So this is the second phase. So we promote and uphold, we own and embrace, and then we advance and fulfill the culture. And this is the long-term impact of the business culture, is we should be able to benchmark performance and behaviors against all cultural statements. And this is something that we actually do, Dirk, you know this, every month, every quarter, every year, we hold up our culture plaque amongst all the stakeholders and say, is this who we still are? Is this how we still behave? And is this what it should be, right? So we benchmark it. And if we need to make an adjustment because of a market condition change or something that has changed in technology, then we'll make those changes accordingly. So then be accountable to individuals, department performance, right? Accountability is a big part of this final stage. And then create, innovate, and dedicate the right resources to live out your culture. Look, if you live out your culture, your business should have the revenues that you had predicted. It should have the profitability that you had projected, and you should have the impact and client satisfaction that you want your clients to have because of culture in the business.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add there, Mike, one thing that I love about how you engage with culture and values, you'll use it to highlight when you've fallen short or you've made a mistake. And you really do that well. You just say, hey, I'm really committed to this value, and I didn't quite meet the mark this time. And so here's what I'll do right next time.
Yeah, and that's at being accountable, right?
Absolutely.
And that's not just about holding people accountable. It's about holding ourselves accountable to the culture.
Absolutely. And
So
I think
thank you for sharing that.
That could be a struggle, right? We see accountable. We're like, oh yeah, we need to hold people accountable. And we kind of forget that sometimes it's even more important for us to be accountable to our team.
I will make one final statement that the leaders in the organization have to be the ultimate example.
Yep.
This isn't just for employees. This starts at the top and ends at the very bottom, right? So, and everywhere in between. If the leaders aren't doing the culture will not exist in the form that it's presented.
Agreed. Good. Well, let's do this. That is perfect timing. We've got a few minutes left. And what I'm going to ask Mike is for you to monitor the chat and see what questions we have, and we can tackle any that come up there.
Yeah, and it's right. We have 9 minutes left,
Yep.
Dirk, just to kind of bring us some attention to that. I do want to ask Memco staffing, did that help with how you can instill this leadership mentality? Did it help? I would love to just hear, is there more question that you might have behind that? And then anybody else? Yes, you definitely answered my question. Well, that's awesome. Certainly glad to hear that. Any other questions out there? Any other maybe lessons learned? So got a big thank you from Memco. Thank you for being here and listening to us today. Any other questions? Got a thumbs up. Thank you for that. I'd like to, since we're not getting anything, I'd like to close with one comment. And here another comment says, I will say that the accountability part is a major part of the whole process.
Good point.
And it absolutely is, right? Starting with ourselves and then working outward from there, I really do think. For me, business is everything about culture. Right, the way we perform, the kind of company that we have, how we treat each other, the accountability, performance levels. I will say one thing is that I don't know a business owner who would answer this question as like, what are you building? Are you building a high performance company, or are you building an average company? And every owner will tell you we're building a high performance company, right? They don't necessarily know exactly how they're going to do that, but I know every one of you want to build high performance companies. And to have a high performance culture company, you have to have a culture of high performance. And you have to hold yourself accountable and hold the organization accountable to that culture.
Agreed.
Live it, love it. I'll tell you, I'm so passionate about culture. It's my number one thing in business.
That's a great point. I have a similar appreciation for it. So one thing I was thinking about, our emails are here on this last slide. If you have follow-up questions, or you would like support or help in completing any of those exercises we ran through earlier, please don't hesitate to reach out to Mike, myself, or Benny Fowler as well. So with that, Mike, I recommend we wrap it up here. Anything else you want to address before we wrap up?
No, I think, I don't know if the moderator was going to close out at all. Give them an opportunity if there is. Otherwise, thank you all for attending. I certainly appreciate each and every one of you and what you're trying to accomplish every day in business.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.